In this episode of the Aging Well podcast, I'm joined by Larry Weinberg, former executive director of Rum River Art Center in Anoka, Minnesota. Larry dedicated his life to the arts and education, spearheading programs that empower older adults to explore creativity in new and meaningful ways. Now retired, but still active as an instructor, Larry shares his insights on the value of creative aging, his personal journey as an artist and educator, and the lasting community impact of Rum River Art Center initiatives. Together, we'll discover how art can inspire personal growth, foster connections, and help us all age well. Larry, welcome to the Aging Well podcast. Can you tell us about yourself and your journey as an artist and educator, and what inspired your passion for the arts?
Well, I'm a lifetime artist. I was born kind of into a creative family in Minnesota, and we had some crazy aunts that were big-time painters, and they would take me to museums, and I had some art instructors that got me really interested. I always liked to draw, so from when I was very little, I'd always have sketchbooks and things like that. And then as I went into high school, I had an art teacher who said that I wasn't as good technically as a lot of other people, but I had much more creativity. And he said, "You're the one who's going to be an artist." And so I kind of listened to that, and then I went to the University of Minnesota and got a BFA from the University of Minnesota in the early 70s. And it was just an amazing time for me because there was a lot of New York artists that were there. And they had worked with Jackson Pollock, they had worked with Motherwell, they'd worked with all these famous artists. And I didn't know they were famous, but then later there was like art stamps with George Morrison, who was one of my teachers, and Raymond Hendler. And these people that they're just my teacher, but they were these actually famous people. And I was determined to be an artist, and that was, I went full bore into it for about a year until I couldn't make ends meet anymore. And I got a job. I got in the creative field. I was a direct, I ended up doing window display for a store called Dayton's in Minneapolis. And it was my creativity. I still being an artist. In my mind, I was still being an artist. But what happened was I realized it was business. And I had to basically do business. I continued drawing and painting, but I ended up I kept proceeding, getting promoted and doing things. So I got to be vice president of marketing and worked in the corporate field for 20 years. And then I met my wife, and we ended up starting a cosmetic business. And I was her partner, and I was the marketing, and she was the creator. And creator came up with the product. And we moved into this little building in Anoka, Minnesota, which is, by the way, the world capital of Halloween. And they're self-proclaimed, but it's a big deal there. And it was a old milk factory. And I says, "That means it's a creamery." And no, it was dry milk. And it was built in the late 1800s. And it was this amazing old brick building. Anyway, fast forward, we did that for a while. Her business was well, but then kind of declined. And I got bored, so I started looking at teaching. And I would do some after-school classes. When my daughter was growing up, I was always teaching her friends art. I never lost it. I was always painting or doing things, but usually just on vacation. So I started doing this after-school classes for another company. And the people said, "You're really good at this. Will you do it during the summer?" When I said, "Well, let me see." So I got a little space for my wife in this old milk factory, about 500 square feet. And we started teaching classes. And the interesting part of it is it started out for kids. And it was classes that were about art making process. I didn't want to be people following me and just doing what I did. I wanted them to learn the process and the joy I get from being creative. So what happened was people liked it, and some parents asked me if I was do homeschool teaching of art. And I said, "Homeschool, what's that?" And so they said, "Well, we have a group of friends who we do homeschooling, but we don't have any art." And I said, "Sure." So we started doing it, and all of a sudden I was having 20 kids coming to different art classes at the art center. We had to make a little bit bigger room So little by little it grew, and that's how it kind of started. And then, people kept asking for things. So the growth of the art center was very organic. We started in 2009 with 500 square feet. It's over 10,000 square feet now because we could grow into this old building. And the landlord, we don't own it. The landlord keeps asking me when I want to buy it, when we want to buy it. Now, I'm past tense because I've retired, but it was an amazing growth. And it was interesting because it just organically grew because people would ask these questions. So it was kind of fascinating how we got it. And then it was 2017, I got an email from E.A. Michelson, who was looking for some vitality art uh, companies to come and help them. They were doing a seeding, and they needed some like 15 different companies in Minnesota to be part of this kind of experiment. And so that's how we really got started in Vitality Arts is in 2017. And we were chosen, which was, they took a chance on us because we were small, Jeff, at the time. We were just a little organization. And what happened is they helped us kind of get our ducks in a row so we could be part of this funding. And we started out in 2018 with three classes, a painting class, there was a drawing class, and maybe a pottery class. And they were 8-week sequential learning classes. And I can talk a little more of that later. But what happened was it had a snowstorm. It was the beginning of April in Minnesota. We had a snowstorm. We said, oh, do we cancel? We said, well, just see who shows up. Everybody showed up that week. And they were so excited. Oh, we weren't going to stop. We were coming. So that kind of took off from there. And we've never really turned back. Today, I was looking at what they're offering in the spring, and they offer over 25 different multi-week classes for the spring session. So it's been an amazing journey for it, and the growth of the organization has been just amazing.
So I was going to ask you what inspired the development of the Rum Rivers Art Center, but it sounds like it inspired itself.
It inspired itself. It was, people said, well, what was your business plan? I said, people asked for something, we did it. It was very.
That's the best business plan.
It was very organic, and it was, as things happen, the biggest problem, and my wife will attest to this, I never say no. I always will say yes. I'm the yes person. Let me see what I can do. And I hate saying no, so I kept trying and finding things. People wanted to do, we offered pottery, but it was hand-built pottery. And people kept asking, we want to do wheel throwing. And he says, well, that's a whole different animal. You have to get all these wheels. And so we started looking, and in 2018, we couldn't get a grant because they said, we don't know, how you're going to make this. And so we said, we'll do it on our own. So we did a Groupon, and we pre-sold classes so that we could have enough money to buy some wheels. So we bought 6 wheels based on the money we got for pre-ordering this class. And now we need a second studio just for pottery wheels. That's how, it took off. And it was pretty amazing. But that's a little example, and that's a lot of how things came about.
And so you didn't really start out intending to provide art programs for older adults. It was really more just for kids.
No, when we met E.A. Michelson, it was Ellen Michelson. I remember meeting her at, it was the downtown Minneapolis Marriott. And, I started talking to this person, and I didn't realize she was the head of the foundation. And she was so welcoming. We ended up chatting, and she says, I'm so surprised to see a principal here. Most times organizations will just send one of their directors or an underling to come for these things. I'm actually talking to the person who makes decisions. I says, yeah, it's true, yeah. I says, we're that small, Ellen. I said, but it was a great, and it was so fun, to be part of a kind of a groundbreaking thing. So, Jeff, we had maybe 1 or 2% of older adults in the art center taking classes in 2017, and today it's over 45% of our population is older adults. and it's amazing. During the school year, during the ninth, from September through uh, May, it's over 75% of our students are older adults. What skews it is that we do summer camps for kids, and so we have like 1,000 kids come in, take art classes during the summer. So it's
That's awesome. And do you find that a lot of the older adults coming in are people who had a lot of creative, artistic talent when they were younger, and their careers and their lives just kind of pulled them away from that, and then they're kind of recapturing that passion?
it is. It's that. There's two kind of elements here, Jeff. It's the people that had this wanted to always be artists, and so they came and they're exploring it again and they're flourishing. And then there's the people that never took an art class in their life, but they were either dragged along by a friend or by a spouse, and you can't believe how creative they were. They come in and they become some of them become teachers because they said, I didn't know I had this in me. I never was creative. My favorite line is they say, I couldn't even draw a stick figure. And I says, well, stick figures are actually pretty creative, so don't say that. But yeah, it's a journey. And I think that what we saw is when we first started, we started with these beginning classes. It was like beginning drawing, beginning painting, beginning watercolor, beginning pottery. And as time went on, and was asked for, we did intermediate, and then we did advanced classes, and we moved on to emerging artists, meaning that they surpassed all the classes and they needed one-on-one attention. So we were able to find matches with artists, working artists, and emerging artists, and put them together for like a 6-month period or a year and let them see what happens. And it was just so much fun to see. But the experience, I think when we first started, Jeff, one of the big things that was so amazing to me was we went through the first 8 weeks, and it's sequential learning. So what E.A. Michelson kind of did, they trained us. They went through and showed us how to build a lesson plan, how to build that one class leads to the next, and so that you have a nice learning curve of where you want to go with these, art making process. So, and then at the end, there would be, like every class, there was always a welcoming. Okay, we would do a little maybe question or a little exercise, and then there would be a recap. And then at the end of the 8, we have a culminating event. Okay, so the culminating event was amazing because they brought their friends and their family. We'd have a little gallery show. Their grandkids would be there. The looks on their faces, and they'd say, "Grandma, I didn't know you were an artist. My goodness, you did that!" It was amazing. It was just so much fun to see the pride that people took, and how they interacted with their family, and how many times people would come up to me, and say thank you for what you're doing, because it was an interesting journey, because we did not do it for the money, Jeff, because for us many times my wife and I, we would pay our employees, but we wouldn't pay ourselves because we had to make ends meet. And it was a tough goal for making it. And I had a very understanding landlord who would let me pay rent late sometimes. And it was just a great kind of camaraderie. We would figure things out.
Yeah, it got me thinking now about how, maybe I am a little bit more interested in retiring so that I can have time to kind of recapture some of my creative, artistic abilities. Because I was one of those ones in elementary school. I was selected. I grew up in Pittsburgh, and Carnegie
Okay.
Museum had a program
Sure.
for elementary school art students, and they picked like 2 kids from every elementary school. So I was picked from my school to go, and I think I spent 2 years going every Saturday morning for art lessons. And it was one of those things where I got more involved in sports, and I tell this to people often, I was very balanced by how I was raised in terms of my dad would drop me off for my lessons at Carnegie Museum and then pick me up like a couple hours later. I would change in my football uniform in the Liberty Tunnels in Pittsburgh and then go, play football. And I think I just kind of, the sports, and then getting into, in college, I started more in the engineering end of it. And so my artistic talents started to go more toward drafting and doing those kind of things, much more mechanical kind of drawing. I still kept
What
doing
kind of art did you do
cartoons.
as a kid? What did you like to do as a kid?
I did a little bit of everything. I think probably my more favorite, and if I had felt that I had a creative enough mind, I might have gone into being a cartoonist. I remember as a kid, and I was not the most artistic in my school for sure. Even though they picked the top two, I think it was because Chance, my friend Chance, now Wolf, his name's Chance Wolf. Anybody listening, Google him. He is one of the most talented people I've ever come across. I remember as a kid, he lived down the street from me, lying on the floor in his house, drawing cartoons. And he was drawing like a perfect Spider-Man at that point in time. And, I was okay.
Yeah,
I've gotten
I was
better in
always
my
a
drawing and teaching anatomy. That kind of helped refine, allowed me to use some of my artistic talents. But Chance was like just so good. And he's gone on, he's still does artwork for many of the cartoonists. He does inking and the both, he does pencils, inking, and the coloring. But he worked on the Spawn comic and a bunch of these big name comics. I mean, he's well known in the comic book industry, and he makes puppets for ventriloquists. He's
sure.
made a couple really cool products for Terry Vader. If you ever see Terry perform with his Michael
Yes.
Jackson puppet, and I forget the other ones that he's done for him, but he's done several. And he makes magic. I don't know what you call them, magic devices that he sells. He's got Wolf's Magic, and so I mean the guy is just so stinking talented, and it just drives me to want to get back into just drawing again, you know, and refining some of those skills. So I think I need to find when I have that, create that time in my life to be able to, get involved in a program like Rum River or something like that,
Yes.
where I can just go take some lessons and kind of recapture some of those skills that I've lost. And so,
It's so important. It develops part of your brain, and I think that one of the things that in our training, like even with E.A. Michelson and doing the things, is that we learned about all the different health benefits of art, no matter what age you're at, but especially for older adults. It was getting community, but it was the mental part of, and I think there's the left right side brain type thing, but it's one, I don't know which one it is because I never could get my right and left correct, but it gets you into a moment. And one of my favorite things is that I'll be working on something, a sketch or a painting, and my wife will say, well, we have to go. I says, well, it's only been like 10 minutes. You've been at it 2 hours, Larry. You've been, and you lose track of time. And it's so calming to the spirit. It really is. And people, it's amazing because when we do the older adult classes, how they say, how they feel about it. Like now I'm teaching online classes to Rum River on drawing, and the people say, "You mean we're already done? It's been 3 hours, but we're already done." So it's really one of those things that really is amazing to me.
so how do you see that these programs benefit older adults, both mentally and emotionally?
It really does, and it's like one of my students was saying, "I'm really upset because I'm going to miss a class because I have to go to my doctor, and I've been waiting for 6 months. Otherwise, I would have postponed my doctor visit." It becomes that important as part of their life to do that. So that's really what it's that sense of community. I think that one of the interesting stories I tell people is that when we started the Vitality Art programs at the Rum River Art Center, what happened was we started, like I said, with 8-week classes, and then we ended up using a lot of the older adults for teachers. First, they started out as assistant teachers, then they became teachers. They were volunteers. They became employees. We ended up with employees. We ended up, having them as board members. They end up being advocates, and it gives them a sense of purpose. And I think it's one of those things I'm sure you hear about aging well is a sense of purpose. And what we find is art really does give people a sense of purpose.
Yeah, we on this podcast tend to emphasize purpose with a capital P. That
Okay.
it's that broader kind of purpose, and people engaging in activities and becoming engaged in that broader community support that they get from Rum River really helps to develop that sense of greater purpose for individuals. And you seem to be always like one question ahead of me
Oh, I'm
in terms of
sorry.
your answer. No, that's great. I mean, it's just funny. It's like my next question was going to be, how has Rum River Art Center engaged the broader community to support creative aging? And you've already answered that question. And it's
Well,
just,
it was interesting because when we started the older adult programming for the arts, we had to figure out how to let people know we were doing it because we hadn't been doing it before. So we came up with a plan that we would go to the YMCA's. We'd go to older adults. We went to living facilities. We went to the libraries. They sent out a notice that we were going to do these. So we ended up doing free classes, okay? And we do like doodle classes and things like that. And people says, "What do you mean it's over already?" I says, "Well, that's why you got to come to us." And one of the things that we did is when we did these art classes, we determined as an art center that we needed to do it as a sustainable type program. Like a lot of the other organizations were doing it for free. And we said no. Okay, what we wanted to do is we wanted some skin in the game. If somebody doesn't pay anything for something, sometimes they won't show up because there's nothing. Even if you make them pay $1, they're going to be more into it. But we said we figured out the cost, and it was like $150 for an 8-week class. We could do it, and we pay our teachers $75 an hour for teaching. So we paid them a very good artist wage, and we said, well, we'll fund half, but they'll have to fund the actual. And as we went on and we got less and less funding, they ended up having to pay more and more. But we still fund part of it. But we came up with a program that they have to pay for themselves so that if funding goes away, the program doesn't go away. So it was a very intentional. Most of the time, I'm not intentional, as you found out through this podcast, that I let people. But this one, I had vision. I said, the only way that this is going to continue, because this grant isn't going to last forever, and it didn't, and we were able to continue and doing the programming that we do, and it's still growing because people keep asking for more and more different classes, and they fill up. I'm sorry, I probably jumped into a new question for you.
no, you're doing good now. Yeah. So what challenges did you face promoting the value of art programs for older adults, and how these overcome, or did you face any at all? Because it almost sounds
Oh,
like there was no obstacles. It just kept growing and growing.
it kept growing, but there was always obstacles. Like people would say, "Oh, there's plenty of art classes." We got to listen into like the grant process. So we couldn't say anything, but we'd listen when they'd review our grant, and the people that were reviewing the grant would say, "There's plenty of crafts and things." And it isn't about craft; it's about art. And so convincing people that the art making process is what was important. It doesn't matter what you end up with. We're not looking for masterpieces. What we're looking for is you to have a lifelong skill that you can take with you no matter where you are in your life, no matter where you go. Like a lot of us now always carry sketchbooks with us because it allows us to draw, or I'm on the airplane, I'm waiting, I'm wherever I am, I'm always got a sketchbook because it frees my brain. But we had to convince people that it was important for them. And the only way to do that was to give them an opportunity to do it for free. So with our plan, we offered a number of classes where people could come in and take a free art class, and then they could see, and if they wanted to, they'd sign up. And that's how we first got it going. We only had to do that once, because once we got the program going, the word of mouth and the different stories that were written about us and what we were doing got around very quickly. We went to a lot of like women's groups and different business organizations. We went to lunches, and we would promote what we were doing, and then they get the word out. So we went to all these different kinds of clubs, that was usually old white men clubs, but it was clubs that they had a lot of influence, and we got the word out. And it was not easy. And like I said too, that the challenges were that sometimes the timing of things, we would have to find ways of paying the bills, and the funds sometimes didn't show up when they were supposed to show up, and we would always give, if a person needed a scholarship, we'd find a way to do a scholarship. And so we had some times where they were pretty lean. And I think the biggest challenge that we faced was during COVID. So it was March 2020, and all of a sudden COVID hit, and we had to close the art center. No more classes. And I came up with one of my brilliant ideas. I said, we're going to do online classes. And in 2 weeks, we were doing online classes. Now, this is one of the advantages of being small and not having a lot of people looking over our shoulders saying, no, you can't do that. We just went and got some cameras. We got some laptops that would work, and we had plenty of space because we had no classes going on. We turned them into little studios. So we were one of the few arts organizations that grew during COVID, doubled our size.
Wow.
And we had so many people joining our virtual classes. We did classes for companies like Bank of America. They would say, we want to get our employees to connect. So they would do a class. We'd have 100 people, and we'd do a class for them. And we did for all these we did some in Pittsburgh. I was trying to remember what the organization was in Pittsburgh. But we did all these different classes. And what we did is we found art supplies. We made kits. We sent them out. And we still do that today. We make the kits so people there's no obstacles. You want to take the obstacles away. So during, the COVID period, we grew. We over doubled our size, and we've never looked back. And so I've been able to pay myself since 2020. So
That's always good. That's
yes.
amazing that you did that in 2 weeks, because as an academic, I recall when we were told, we were kind of having to shut down, everybody to go online, the amount of panic it took and the complaining about how much work it was and everything else. It was a little bit of work, but I can't imagine what we had to do was near the amount of work you had to do to shift completely from a physical art teaching facility to a virtual art teaching
And
facility.
it was amazing because some of the teachers didn't feel comfortable coming into the art center, so we sent them equipment. We dropped off equipment, so they set up their own home studio too, and so that we try to get. So we started 2 weeks after COVID. We started doing free classes just to get people into the habit of how to log in and how to do it. And then the first week of May, we ended up our spring session doing 8-week classes. So it was within 6 weeks we were actually running actual classes, but we were up and running within 2 weeks.
That's impressive.
I have a student today in my virtual class now, 5 years later, and she said the first class I took was one of those free classes that you gave during COVID, and I loved all the little kids because we would let anybody take it. And a lot of times older adults had their grandchildren with them, and they would have them helping the class. It was amazing. It was really fun to see, all these, how they interjected. And there's so much similarities between kids and older adults. The sense of wonder and the love of life almost is so similar. It's amazing to me because those are my two classes I usually teach. I don't like adults. They ask too many questions, or they're too sensitive. I can't tell them the truth. I usually tell people it's a process. Keep working. Am I done yet? That's my favorite. The kids are saying, am I done yet? Older adults, am I done yet? No, keep working. More layers. And it is. It's about we teach the process. And it doesn't matter what art form we do. We want to teach a process that they can carry with them. It's so important.
So learning this process, in your experience, why do the arts remain such a powerful tool for personal growth and expression, especially in later years? I mean, I understand it in the younger years, kids are growing and they're learning who they are, but for the older adults, what makes it especially powerful for personal growth and expression?
Well, I think that to me, it's that capital P word, purpose. It gives me a purpose every day because I'm a working artist, and it's my job to create my work, and it gives me that sense. I feel so alive. I feel in tune with nature and other people. One of the things that was hardest for any kind of older adult is to share their work with other people. And that was part of the process that we taught. The more they did it, the more they loved it. Let me show you what I'm working on. I want to show you now. And it's like, I can't, wait, we'll have a reveal. No, it's that sense of they're getting this feedback and they feel this worth by what they're doing. And there's that connection. There's the friendship. I think one of the things that we find older adults are making these new relationships through these art classes. One of our art teachers married one of her students. It was, and it's one of these exciting, things where relationships are happening where you don't expect, and friendships. I think that it's like, with older adults, I'm just going to give you a kind of a quick explanation, like when they'll take a class, they're taking a painting class, and it's once a week for 8 weeks. Well, that's not enough for them now. They need more. So we ended up doing open studio time where they could come in and for free they could, use the facility. That wasn't enough because they wanted their friends. So we made a club. We did painting clubs, a pottery club. And they said, no, we want it to be more other people too. So we did community days where anybody could come in and bring anything they want. And we brought in a yoga teacher because they wanted to have their health and their art together. So it's just been I think that I wonder as I was trying to answer your question, but I think it has a lot to do how people really want to grow old with their art. And they see it as a way to communicate and to feel something that maybe they hadn't felt for a while is the best way I can explain it.
We talk a lot on this podcast about what my friend Jay from high school identified as SPIES. We talk about spiritual, physical, intellectual, emotional, and social, and how important all of that is in balance to be what I call well-centered or well-centered fitness. And so what you're talking about is that whole SPIES principle. And when you get involved with the arts, and especially you bring in some of the things like yoga or other activities to complement all that, you're covering the spiritual, the physical. I mean, a lot of people would say, well, art's not really physical, but
it is.
the physiological changes going on. Yeah, true. But even from a physiological response, me as an exercise physiologist, thinking, we talk about the physiological responses to exercise, but there's also those physiological benefits that come from, the chemical releases from the brain and even just the manual dexterity. I would suspect that if you really dived into this a little bit more and did research over the longevity of your programs, that you probably would ultimately see that there is less incidence, or at least delayed incidence of dementia in these individuals that are participating in these programs.
Absolutely. It is. And people, one of the things that's interesting about the art classes is that people fall less because they're doing more hand-eye coordination. And you're training your brain to do certain things, and your balance becomes better. And we have them stand up and draw. We have them sit down. We're doing little things, little exercises at the same time. But it's like now that I'm retired, I have this routine that when I get up in the morning, I do about anywhere from 35 to 60 minutes of yoga. I get my mind all clear. I go for a 2 to 3 mile walk, and then I come back and do my art. And I'm at the most creative then. I've done these different things, and then I'm always kind of using this whole kind of philosophy of aging well by using the physical and the mental. I like to read every day. It's all part, and healthy eating is important, but it's kind of just setting up a routine. And so for me, it's really important for me as an artist to be in a routine. Inspiration is overrated. Okay. I'm just going to tell you, you look at any famous artists, they'll tell you the same thing. It's hard work. Okay. It's a job and you have to create, and you're using the creative skills. I'm very rarely inspired by anything. I'll see something and I'll maybe use that as a starting point, but it's not. Inspiration plays about 2% of my art making. So I don't. People say, "Well, I'm not inspired." I said, "I don't care. It's not important." The work's important.
So it's like 2% inspiration and 98% perspiration.
That's exactly what it is, and it's so much, it's so true in so many things, so many other things, but it's true in the arts. And I think people have a misconceived idea that it's inspiration that uh, does it. And one of the things when I teach classes, I usually use artists as a base for my lesson plan. So if I do Van Gogh, I'll say, well, Van Gogh did all these sunflowers. It was an experiment. He used two colors with a third color, and he wanted to see what what ended up with. So he did it 13 times, with these flowers, and it was hard work for him because this was like an experiment, seeing what happens. And that's a lot of the great artists. It's the same thing, and you get to read about them and the philosophies. It's funny because I was art history minor, because I have to have a minor to graduate, and I paid no attention. I just did it so I'd get through and graduate. Now I'm a art history buff because I'm so fascinated by what I can learn. And I tell people I have to learn something new every day. That's my goal. And I consistently do that because I'll look and I say, well, how did that work? How did they do that? So I'm just very curious about things, and I have just a kind of ongoing, excitement for life. My wife finally got me to retire when I was 71 years old, and it's kind of like I still feel very, invigorated every single day. So
That's good because a lot of people they retire and it just everything goes downhill from there because they have nothing to fill that void. As we enter into that third age. And as you were talking about some of the physiological and kind of the multitude of benefits of the art, practicing the arts as we age. Have you experienced anybody with like Parkinson's coming into your programs? Because I'm really curious if you've seen any
yes,
benefits
yes,
from that.
yes, we've had quite a few people actually come in with Parkinson's and ALS, and there's been some famous artists that have worked with that and created a whole style, and they progress. It helps them with the slowing down the process by doing the art, and especially with Parkinson's, we have one of our students now who is seeing a lot of benefit with his Parkinson's, being that his hand-eye coordination is continuing, standing as he's working and creating more things and being more engaged versus descending into woe is me. And
Mm-hmm.
it seems to really keep his spirits up. That's just one example. But we've had many people that have come in and have worked with us for years, and they can't do what they could do in the past, but they do something different, which is still very creative. There was an artist, and he'd come in and he had the shakes so bad, but he used to do all these precise things, and then he started doing these big color swatches and some of these things that were so fascinating. The energy was incredible, and he says, "This is so much more creative now. I feel free." He says, "I used to be constrained into these little areas. This disease has given me freedom." And so it's pretty cool to hear. So,
That's where again we
I
put
think
that
that,
big P in the purpose.
yes, yes. So I think that we find that, we've done programming with people with dementia. We go into living facilities and nursing homes, and we do different classes with dementia. We do play classes. We do things so that we're part of. They recognize the importance of art making process. So and we can see a difference. I remember one of my she's the head of our Vitality Arts program, explaining to me the first time she went to a living facility, and this 95-year-old woman came down to do this play class. And it was an 8-week class, and the woman couldn't even use her hands to make a ball the first time, but she wanted to try it. By the last class, she was doing pottery, and she could move her fingers, and it was such a desire that she had, that capital P for purpose. And she said the woman ended up having her own show of her pottery over the last 18 months. So it was pretty incredible. of the transformation we can see when people have the drive to do something.
So we've had a lot of really, I'm sorry, what was that?
It just, there's some great stories out there, but I'm sorry I interrupted you.
Oh, that's okay. I interrupted you. So we're even. But, we're hearing these great examples of how positive it is to be doing art as we age. What advice would you give for someone who feels hesitant or uncertain about exploring their artistic side?
Well, what I would tell them is to start simple. I always tell people to start with a sketch. I says, get a sketchbook and look at something you're interested in, be it a flower, bird, whatever, and don't try to represent what you see, represent what you feel about that object. You have a camera if you want to take a picture of it, but give it your impression of what it is. And I say, look at it, and I try to say, break it down, make it simple. So if I will teach people by taking a very complicated picture and I'll break it down to shapes. Okay, there's a circle here. There's a triangle here. Okay, and then these people, oh my God, we have this whole building here. And I says, that's right. It isn't don't try to picture that you have to do this whole thing. Keep it simple. Just look at some things that you see. And I usually tell people to just draw what they see and to have some fun. And I give them an example I give them is I give them a 7-day challenge. Draw something in your sketchbook for 7 days and date it. And then look back at how you changed over those 7 days. And every single one of them sees a difference. There's more confidence. There's more, it's a sense of doing it. It's just going ahead and making that jump is what's important. So I mean, that's the biggest advice is go someplace where you have a lot of times what we tried to do at the Rum River Art Center was make it very inviting so that people were not intimidated. Because one of the biggest problems, like if you've never done anything art, and you go in and you see all these artists there, okay, or you think they're artists, oh, and we just tell them, no, just come in, enjoy yourself. Don't worry what other people are doing. And what you find out and that's why free classes are important, is that they find out that everybody's sharing what they're doing. Everybody's doing something a little bit different. And they say, oh, they see that there's something that they really like. And so I really tell them, start with something that you're interested in. If you get a sketchbook, start drawing what you're interested in. It could be a cartoon, it could be apples, it could be trees, anything. One of my favorite things I do in the summer is I teach a nature journaling class. And I make people, I said, you can't draw for 10 minutes. You just have to sit and listen and observe. And then you can start drawing. You can't draw first. I said, I want you to be in the moment. And then, I don't really put a timer. I let them draw when they want. But it's that idea of letting it happen. And I think that's what I'll tell people is you just let it happen, it will.
So how can communities and policymakers better support programs like those at Rum River Art Center?
Well, I think that a lot of it is understanding how important. I think that one of the things my wife and I found out through trying to build the art center was that arts were always down the line. Sports or different things would always come in before the arts, and they saw them as arts as second-class citizens. But I think that arts are important as every stage of life, and that the more that communities and different municipalities and people understand it, the more it becomes a reality. I think one of the things that we did, Jeff, was when we started a summer camp program for older adults, and because they felt they were missing out, and we didn't have any space, so we went to the cities, local cities around Anoka where we were from, and they gave us parks that had benches and restrooms because we're older adults. And then, we did it with 3 different municipalities, and we did these summer camps. And they were such a success that other cities started coming to us saying, why don't you come to us? We want to do it too. We have this park, we have this park. So by showing them how it affects their constituents is a big important part of it. And if you can have the older adults or the artists themselves in that process, in communicating those things to governments or organizations, it makes a big difference.
And so how has all this work influenced your perspective on aging and living a fulfilling life?
Oh, it's made a huge difference to me, and the trajectory of the Art Center changed dramatically, as I kind of told you. But for me personally, is that everybody has got this ability to be a creative person. It's just find a process that works for them, and how it's going to make you feel, and how it's going to better your life. And so I continually talk to people as I travel or as I'm out, finding different ways I can kind of communicate and be part of different communities. No matter where I'm at, I try to embed myself with the community and share my love of art and the art making process. And I think that's really changed, and I see as older adults that I can make a difference in their life. And as as a teacher, as a proponent, all these things kind of help. You know, one of the things that I kind of have people do is like I tell them that there's some great resources out there. You know, E.A. Michelson has some great videos on their website. The E.A. Michelson Philanthropy has these videos that show how easy it is to get involved in the arts. Being, you know, I'm at the media arts, but there's other arts, like you said, you talked about writing and music. But, you know, for us, what we found is the physical, the mental, by being able to be in the visual arts is so important as part of aging well.
Speaking of aging well, we've come to the point in the interview where I ask you the question I ask of all my guests. What are you doing personally to age well? You've alluded to a little bit of this. So.
Yes, like I said that I have kind of a routine, and my routine is that I like to do yoga in the morning. I do at least 30 minutes, and I like to go for a walk. So I walk. It's much easier to walk where I'm at right now than in Minnesota, but I would still go for my walk, and then I come back and do my creative work. And no matter if I feel like it or not, I want to do that. And then I try to eat things and drink a lot of water. I think that's part of my process of doing it, and is having a good attitude. And I don't sweat the small stuff, and I think that's one of the big things. I try to avoid stress, and you know, I'm waiting in line. I just appreciate the moment, and it's kind of an attitude that I have of just kind of being more relaxed and enjoying the moment, whatever moments I have, because I actually feel healthier today than I did 20 years ago, and I'm in better shape. I'm eating better. I'm sleeping better. And I think those are things that people can look forward to if they get into good routines.
Now, part of your routine, do you have a bedtime?
I do. I have set up a bedtime. I have it at 10:30. I try to stick to that. You know, whether I'll sleep at 10:30 is another story, but I put away my phone usually at 8. I usually like to read. I do not watch TV. I do not watch TV at night. I don't watch movies. I kind of let my mind settle in and relax. And now I can sleep. So, you know, I naturally wake up with whatever the sun starts coming up is when I get up. I can't remember the last time I had to set an alarm, because I'll get up when the sun gets up here where I'm at is around 5:30. So I'm usually getting up at 5:30. So and I believe it's important for getting into routine like bedtime. And I do use my phone to remind me it's time to wind down.
Those are good practices.
Yeah.
And so for the listeners interested in starting their own creative journey, what do you recommend? Where do you recommend they begin?
Well, I think that you know, the Rum River Art Center is a great resource. They have virtual classes. They have lots of videos. They have free classes. They have a blog, so you can kind of try some things right away doing that. But going to your local art centers, you know, community art centers is important. I think that there's a lot of online availability for art classes too. But I think that finding something where you can do it in person is really an important kind of community type thing. A lot of libraries and YMCAs have different art classes. I would stay away from craft, because it becomes more busy work than anything else. And that people really said that to us is they really enjoyed that we were not trying to do another craft class. We were doing an art process. We were using really good materials and we were treating them as artists. And that's one of the things I always call my students artists. Hello artists. And it is, they're artists. They're in different places in their journey, but they're all artists. And I think that, like I mentioned too, for some of the benefits, people can go to E.A. Michelson Philanthropy, to see some of the videos. There's a great one that Jane Fonda did, being that she's 86 years old, about the biggest way to improve your older adult life is to take art classes. That's what Jane Fonda was telling us, and I trust her, especially as she's talking about art classes. But it's one of those things. I think that's important. I think you can find different resources, and I usually will go tell them if they can go and look up their local art center, some classes in person and things like that. But if people, the classes I teach virtually, I have people from all over the country that are taking it because they can do that. They've taken classes. They're from New Jersey or Arizona or California. We have different people. It's fun to see where they're all at, and it's fun to see their little. The first class, I had to stop them talking because some of the people, like 3 or 4 of them, knew each other from previous classes. I said, "Stop! Wait, I'm in charge. I'm going to mute you all." So yeah.
That's awesome. So, did you mention a website yet for Rum River Art Center? Or?
The Rum River Art Center is www.rumriverart.com.
Are there any other places where they can learn a bit more about you?
I was telling you about E.A. Michelson. I think that it's E.A. Michelson philanthropy.org /videos. That really, there are some great videos that people can see and get some ideas of what it's like to be creative aging. Whether they want to be just an artist or maybe it has videos about them becoming teachers, why people become teachers, teaching artists. And it's the term teaching artists because we're artists that are actually versus teachers that are trying to teach art. There's a big difference. Sometimes we're not as good teachers because we're artists and we see things differently. That's how we looked at building the art center, is through artists.
Well, this has been a fascinating conversation. We will make sure to put those links in the description notes for this episode. Is there anything we missed talking about?
I don't think so. I think I probably won't talk too much, but it was really enjoyable to share my passion, for the arts and aging. And it's done wonders for so many of my students and myself. And I really tell people, try it. It doesn't matter where you are in your life, but get involved in the art making process.
Well, you've inspired me to pull out a pencil and a piece of paper today and doodle a little bit. I really appreciate this conversation.
Yes. You should have a sketchbook, put the date on it, and you start. And you're going to see you're going to progress.
Yeah, I really need to make more time for doing this. And I was thinking about this earlier as you were talking about carrying a sketchbook. And I said, how much of our artistic talent is being lost by those stupid phones we carry around and the time that we waste scrolling through those when we could be kind of embracing the environment around us and just drawing, whether it's good or bad, just doing something more creative to build our minds.
It's so true. And like, I give little examples, like I make people do like continuous line sketches. I say, start looking, and I make them use a pen, and they have to start looking at something, whatever it is, and pick up their pen until they're done. They can go over as many times as they want. And so it frees them from trying to make it look like anything, and it just gives them a freedom to go ahead and draw. So, and it's a fun process. It really is. And I can't tell people that enough that it's the way that you can age well.
Well, you've inspired me to at least get a little notebook or sketch pad or something and make that a little bit a part of my regular journaling and just aging well health practices. And so really appreciate it. I appreciate the work that you're doing.
There's mine right here.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's my. And I always I cover the cover, and then I'll put my current drawing on it.
My son does a lot of drawing. He's a very good artist, and I hope he continues to kind of do that. And he's very talented. He's got the artistic, the drawing.
Got
He's
it from you.
majoring more in literature and writing,
Yeah.
and so he's creative in that area. And he plays the guitar and all the things that I couldn't do. But I appreciate your time today. And again, just keep doing what you're doing and keep aging well.
Thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today.
Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast. And until next time, keep aging well.